So thanks everyone for taking the time to, and hopefully you're curious about how to possibly give better presentations and some tips and techniques to use. We just finished a session, if you've not seen it, session 007 on the story of a presentation, in which hopefully I walk people through what it's like to build one, to try to design one from the start and what it looks like when you finally give it. By the way, those who actually saw that, what they saw was the presentation I built, so you actually saw the entire journey. For the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to give you some ideas and some things that you might find useful or helpful as you consider presentations. This is more about the mindset that you have, the mindset that your audience has, that might help you. And when it says presentations, it truly means any interaction, any conversation you have with an audience where you want to get a message across. To repeat, the chat is there for you to use. I'm not able to see the chat, so I can't respond to it at this point. So if you want to ask questions, feel free to do so. If they leave it in the chat, I'll try to answer it afterwards. The raising of the hands is not really functional right now because this isn't going to be conversational at the moment. But if you would, just chat away. And if you want to find me afterwards and ask me questions, I'll give you my email at the end. You can instant message me. You can set up some time with me on my calendar, and we can discuss anything you'd like to discuss on these topics. With that, I want to start off with a disclaimer as well. There's two points of reference that I'm going to use throughout this particular talk. There's a book by Gar Reynolds called Presentation Zen, and then there's a video called How to Avoid Death by PowerPoint. It's a TED Talk by David Phillips. If by any chance you've read this book and you understand this book thoroughly, and you have watched this video, and you've watched this video intently, as I've done over a dozen times or so, you're only going to get a small percentage of value out of this discussion. So you might want to reconsider whether you want to spend the next 30 minutes with us or not. But the point is, these are two that if after this you begin reading these or watching these, you'll say, well, Lewis said a lot of those things, so I'm just blatantly stealing from a lot of what these people have to say. So just get over it. In fact, most presentations are that way. When we think about a presentation, what is it really? Well, a presentation is really a present. It's not you're presenting. It's a present. You're giving people something. You're there to offer them something, because what they're doing is they're paying you with their attention and their interest and their time they're spending with you, much like you're doing today. So what I want to do is I want to give you a present. I want to offer you something of value that you can take with you. Just having that mindset alone will change the way you present and the way you approach people. All too often we step into rooms thinking, well, we're honored to be here, or they're honored to have us. We sat on business coach. We sat in commercial grade flights and we've spent hours, and now we're here, and you should be thankful. That's not the way it works. Okay. The thing for you also to understand is it's not about what they hear; it's about what they understand. You could spend an hour of time talking, and if they understand nothing, or if they more importantly, if they remember nothing, then you've basically wasted breath and time, and you've wasted your time and their time, which is a disservice to everyone. So make sure that you're not building your presentations and you're not thinking about how you deliver them just in how am I going to say what I need to say. Think about what they're going to take away and what they're going to understand from that. Because 79% of most presentations are boring. This was a study that was done. And I think we could probably attest to that. 4 out of 5 presentations are not good, to use kind words. And if you think about, we got 100 or so people or whatever on this call. Of that, 1 in 5 of us may have a good presentation, and the others are not. You might be one of the 80%. The point is, boring presentations, for some reason, we suffer through them, we listen to them, and then we have the opportunity to give them, and we go off and give boring presentations. So understand that the watermark is kind of low. The goal that you're trying to get over is low. Just not be boring, first of all, and then we'll work toward interesting. The problem, I think, with this is that we have this concept that we're going to take a tool like PowerPoint and just use it. And the concern is that PowerPoint has no power, and there is no point. Often our presentations aren't telling us anything. They're not taking us anywhere. In the previous session I did on the story of a presentation, the reason you're doing this is to take them on a journey. And if you don't do that, if all you're doing is just flashing information in front of them and hoping of attracting their attention or getting something to stick, that's the wrong reason to be doing this. So as a technique, you should be understanding that you have things you need to do. So I'm going to give you 6 considerations. Now, one of the things I said in an earlier session was that you should take 3 steps. And so this is breaking that rule. But the reason I'm breaking this rule is because I'm not trying to get you to believe something. I'm trying to offer up to you now some things, some considerations for you to take that might improve the way you do things. And all 6 of these may apply. Only one of these apply. And if only one of them applies to you and you can take that home and actually use it and use that in your business, then hopefully it'll be a benefit to you. So there's 6 considerations. The first consideration is 1 message per slide. Okay, 1 message per slide. Now that sounds kind of simple, right? Just 1 message per slide. In the earlier session, I talked about using sticky notes. And if it's too much to put on a sticky note, then it's too much to put on a slide. We may believe that, but this is the slides we put up. This is an IBM slide, and how many messages are on that slide? I mean, just look at that. If you were to put that in front of me while you're talking, my head is going, okay, so what is on this slide? And how many things are there? And what should I be paying attention to? And what's he talking about at this point? Way too many things for me visually to understand while you're talking. And so building decks with information like this on them is an issue. And never apologize for a slide. Okay, we kind of chuckle, but we've been in presentations. I'm not going to say that any of us have done this, okay? But I've been in presentations where a slide will come up and the presenter will go, well, I know you can't read this. If you know you can't read it, don't use it. Or I know that the people in the back, I know this is a busy slide. Then don't use it, okay? Never apologize for a slide. If you find yourself apologizing for a slide, never use it again, okay? Just forget it. Move on. Do something else. And slides like this, these are very common slides for us. It has lots of information on it, lots of text. Explains all about Linux on Z and the advantages and so forth. And I could sit there and read that slide. Make a check. If you can actually take your presentation and send it to someone ahead of time, and they can read your deck and get the majority of your talk, then you are basically unnecessary. You're not needed. Just send them the deck. Let them read it. In fact, we can read faster than you can talk. So if you give me something to read, I can read it much quicker and be more effective at getting it than having you come in and just recite it to me. So understand that we put decks with lots and lots of information in it, and we say that, oh, that's because we need it. There's not enough working memory in people's minds to actually take all that in. So be careful about how you use your space and use your time when you're building these presentations and giving them. When we think about working memory is the fact of what can our brains do and how do our brains function. And this is more about what the audience does than how yours functions, okay? But in working memory, there's only a couple of things they can do. Here's a slide I would like to present to you. I'd like to talk to you about cloud-based HR technology. This is an area where we're working really hard to do things. While I'm speaking to you, you're looking at this slide going, okay, there's the workforce is increasingly consolidating the workforce. You're reading, and people cannot read and listen at the same time. It's just impossible. My working memory will not allow me to do both. And so I'm doing one or the other, or I'm thrashing back and forth, and I'm doing one, in most cases I'm doing both poorly. So understand that when you put up stuff to read, people will try to read it, or at least they'll try to associate what's there with what you're saying. And that's brain matter and energy that they're expending that they're not really listening to you. You are the messenger. You are the expert in the room. It's not the slide. So don't let that be a problem with you. There should be 2 decks you have. If you need that multiple decks, there's decks that you give. These are the decks that you stand up and you present from. And then there's decks you leave behind. Don't get them mixed up. Don't present a deck that you could just leave behind and it'd be effective. Now, I've had people come to me and say, that deck you just did, can I get a copy of that? And in those cases, I usually try to have another deck that either has extensive speaker's notes in it to explain why there's a picture of an elephant or whatever on the screen, or why the word fear is in the middle of the screen, and what does that matter? Often they'll use those just to jog their memory as to when I saw Lewis's presentation, this reminds me. Those are good decks. But if it's just a matter of leaving deck behind, don't present that deck. When it comes to size makes a difference, okay? The number of slides don't matter. Please don't let anyone tell you you need 10 slides or you only need 6 slides. There's been kind of a rash of things where people say, gee, you have too many slides. You got 30 minutes and you have too many slides. You can only use 10 slides. What ends up happening is we have 40 slides or 40 things that we want to get across or 40 things that we want to do, and we end up just crunching those into 10 slides. Now you have 10 slides that are 4 times filled with garbage. The number of slides don't matter. The way you use your slides matters. The previous presentation I did it in 20 minutes, the previous session, and I think I had 63 slides in that deck. 63 slides, 20 minutes, and I ended early. So slides, the number of slides, don't let anybody ever tell you that the number of slides matters. And please don't use the page numbers at the bottom. It doesn't. Now, it may be important when you leave a deck behind to put page numbers in it, Or in some cases, having a page number might be relevant if you're talking to a crowd who might say, well, back on slide 17 or in the question and answer time, they may be able to take notes of slides. But never, ever have like the slide 19 of 63 like is shown here, because people are looking at that and going, oh my God, he's got 63 slides. We're only 1/3 of the way through this. You might as well just shoot me. Okay, don't use that. Hopefully they're not saying that. Hopefully they're looking at it going, only 1/3. Gee, how much more is he going to be able to give us? So, number of slides. Large text. Why is large text? Why does that matter? Well, our brains and our functions and how we actually look at things and find things that are important, our survival has been built off the fact that we pay attention to these 4 things: moving objects, signaling colors, things like red and yellow and those bright colors, contrasting objects, things that stand out, and big objects. Now, I'd like to just take a look at this slide and look at this, by the way, follows most of our templates that we have. The big, gigantic title at the top and then the smaller list of things at the bottom. That right now, your attention is actually drawn to that top title because it's the biggest. What if I were to shift that around? Your survival demands attention to, these are the 4 things I want you to know: moving objects, signaling colors, contrasting objects. If I flip back and forth, you can see how your attention moves back and forth. Use the size of text to help you guide people through what it is you want them to see. So the larger objects on the screen, people are naturally going to gravitate toward that. The more colorful objects, contrasting objects. And when we think of things like movement, this is a case where here's a slide that I used in the previous presentation. It's a journey of belief. There's 3 steps. And one of the first steps I want to talk about is questions. Now, if I just took that and just moved to the next slide where questions appears, you may be at this point kind of searching around for where's the word question, because that's a busy cockpit. There's a lot going on visually. In other words, it took you a while to find that. If, however, I were to do like I did in the last presentation and use motion to do that, and it's a simple tool called morphing, it's easy to do in PowerPoint, is to take this slide and say, I'm going to now move you to questions, and you move the text at the same time you're transitioning to the slide. That gives them a motion. Their eyes are moving with you. And if you can guide their eyes to where you want them to go, to the things that are important, their mind can relax and not have to wonder where do you want their attention, because you want to lead them through. Again, this is about having a technique of how you build presentations in a way that you're guiding people where their brains are at rest, where their brains are susceptible to the things that you want them to understand and to learn. Another area that's extremely important, and this is an area, by the way, that most of all of our decks have some ability to become better in, and it's the area of contrast. Now, here's 6 things. Okay, these are the 6 questions I used as a checkpoint in the earlier presentation. I could put this slides up just like this and talk about those 6 topics. What's the topic? Who's the audience? What do they believe now? And I can take you through that. But if you watched this presentation previously, you'll notice that what I did was I started off with what's the topic. And there's even 6 pictures over in the right-hand side. And I highlight the picture that goes with the topic. What's the topic? When I go to the next one, I actually then make that bold and I dim the other one. And by the way, you can take any bit of text, anything in PowerPoint and others, and just make the transparency so that it actually dulls it out. Very easy to do. It doesn't take graphics whiz to do this, but you can actually walk people through. So now I'm taking you through this list one at a time. I'm bouncing you around. I'm making you look where I want you to look. It's like a cat with a laser pointer. I can move you around, and that's a very powerful thing for you to do. When you're with an audience, you want to move them and move their eyes and move their attention to what's important. If you just put up all 6 things at one time, they're going to start reading ahead. They're going to start trying to figure out what's going on. If you guide them through this, this is a journey. Even this bulleted list or this list is a journey that you want to take them through. Consider it so. In this particular case, I think this was 7 or 8 slides in my deck because I didn't do the builds and whatever. I just did 7 or 8 slides. It looked the way I wanted them to look. Again, number of slides don't matter. It's what you do with them. If you're in a room and you're doing a presentation, and especially if you're just going to use dark, big text, highly recommend a dark background. The reason for that is when you're in a room and there's a screen somewhere that's showing this, it's a good chance that that screen is bigger than you are. And when people are looking up at you and looking up at the screen is going to be the prominent thing in the room. And so by contrast, they're going to be looking at the screen unless it's dark. If it's dark, the text they'll be looking at, and then you'll be the most contrasting part of the room. So you want to put yourself in a position where they will be able to see and notice and recognize you and look to the screen as needed to look at the text. Now I want you to take, just look at your screen right now. This is a dark background. Now I'm going to change it over to what would be a white background. Now I don't know if you felt that or not, but that feels different. In fact, to me, white background slides with dark text on it is actually harder. There's more of a strain. And especially if you're in a room, if you've ever been in a room where there's 3 large gigantic screens or whatever it is, and there's this brilliant white coming out all over. It is actually almost painful to sit through that presentation. So I would highly encourage you to experiment with using darker backgrounds if possible, or using imagery or whatever. But the white background can sometimes be harsh. Don't be afraid either of having open spaces. Open spaces give the person who's looking at this a time to relax. If I speak to the slide for a bit, if I'm talking to the slide, there's a bit of peace about this. It's not being rushed through. Having gaps, having pauses, much like in a conversation where you might pause for effect. Having a place in your decks where there's not the busyness will actually let the person's mind rest just a bit and allow them to relax a bit, because over any period of time, anything longer than a couple of minutes, the brain needs to relax in order to regain and catch the next topic. So open space is a nice thing to have on your slides. Give them places to look around. And now we'll get into a little bit about visuals themselves. The last topic, there was a lot of questions at the end about visuals and how do you use visuals. Well, visuals are there to help you, okay? But you have to use them wisely. In just 1 minute or just a second, I'm actually going to flip to the next slide. The slide's actually going to have dots on it. It's actually going to have these white dots on the slide. When I flip, whenever it appears on your screen, I want you to count the dots that are on the screen. And I want you, if you can, kind of in the back of your mind, think about how long it takes you to count those dots. So with that, let's go. Okay, so 10 dots. For most people, it takes about 2 seconds, for me, a little over 2 seconds to count the 10 dots that are on that screen. So that's just one experiment. So now I'm going to flip to another slide with another number of dots on it, and I want you to count the dots that are on this slide. Okay, that's 7 dots. Now, for most people, it's been shown that they can count 7 dots on a slide like this in about 1.2 seconds. So we went from 2 seconds with 10 things to 1.2 with 7. I'm now going to flip to this next slide, and I want you to, if you were to shout it out, that'd be great, but that's not going to help anybody. But just immediately speak out the number of dots on this slide. 5. Most people get that almost instantaneously. In fact, it's 0.2 seconds to find 5 dots. The reason for that is our brains are able to see things in such a way that when you look at the 10 dots or the 7 dots, you have to count. You didn't have to count 5, you saw 5. Your brain is actually able to just encompass that entire thing and say 5. In fact, the magic number is 6. 6 dots or 6 objects on a screen, I can get in 2.2 seconds. If you put more than that, my brain has to work harder, up to 500% more to try to understand the objects that are on the screen. So as I'm showing you stuff, if I'm putting lots and lots of objects on the screen, then I'm going to be spending a lot of mental energy trying to digest that. I'm going to show you a deck. This is not for you to look at. These are however many objects on the screen. This is actually a deck. The reason I'm showing this to you is look at each one of those individual slides. Look how many objects are on all those. You know, that's insane. Okay, you take a person through this, and by the way, anybody who's ever presented like this, and if you've ever presented like this, there's no time better than the present to actually change this. But I want you to consider that you're in the middle of a presentation. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but you're presenting in this kind of a deck, and someone raises their hand and they said, will we get a copy of these slides? Now you may look at that and think, listen to that and think, wow, I'm impressed. I'm really kicking this. They want a copy of these slides. If that ever happens, especially in the middle of a conversation where they raise their hand to interrupt you to say, will we get a copy of these? What they're actually saying is the same thing as, can I turn my brain off because you're killing me? In other words, I am so tired of trying to read all these slides and understand all these slides that what I want is, can you give me a copy of these so I can just basically numb out at this point? And I won't even try to pay attention because I'll just look at this later because you're wearing me out. So please be careful of how often you wear your audience out. 6 objects on the slide, the most, okay? Too many is way too much. Visuals support your narrative, not the other way around. When you pick imagery, when you pick visuals, make sure that they agree with what you're having to say and don't take people away from the topic. If you have to explain why a visual exists, unless there's a good story around it, sometimes I've put a picture of a squirrel up, for instance, and I've talked about how squirrels hide things and they can't find things, and then we as humans, we expect to find things. Sometimes a squirrel might alert them and go, what's he doing with a picture of a squirrel? But that's going to support a story I'm telling. Make sure that whatever you show up on the screen supports the narrative that you're about to tell. If you ever leave a slide and a person who doesn't know your topic or doesn't know that what you've talked about already, if you leave a slide and they wonder, why did he show me a picture of a phone or what is it, whatever it was, then you've done a disservice, because their brain is trying to figure out what's the connection here. So make sure that you give them the connection. One easy thing to do too when you're thinking about visuals, and this is a case where, for instance, we like to use big pictures and we then put text over the top of them. If you look at this text, it's hard to read because it's light text and the background fluctuates from light to dark. Within PowerPoint and in Keynote, there's the opportunity for you to pick on the text object and go over to the properties and put a glow around it. If you have any troubles doing this, look it up, search for a video on how to do it. If you get really lost, come to me and I can help you. But it's just a matter of putting a glowing, say a dark glow around this so they stand out. Another thing that we do a lot within the IBM templates and that you can do on your own is to just put a shape on the screen like a square, fill it with a color, in this case white, go into that white shape and make it partially transparent so it actually blends in a little bit so you can see the picture through it, enough so that when you put, in this case, dark text over the top of it, you can still read the text and you can still get a sense of the image. So that's something that's, by the way, that's used often in some of the IBM templates that we have, and you can do that as well. This is all very personal as well. Remember, when you're doing these things, it's about people. Let them work the problem. In this case, this is a technique that you use. Is often helpful in getting a point across. Is if you let them solve the problem. If you take them up to a point, instead of giving them the answer, take them up to the point where they can kind of derive the answer, so they can kind of learn how to finish your sentence. An example here is I have a 4-year-old granddaughter named Lily, and when we have family over for the holidays, we often take these 1,000-piece puzzles and pour them out on the dinner table because people like to get around after, late at night, and we work puzzles and we have talking over them and whatever, and we have these big, gigantic puzzles. Well, the little kids like Lily can't really help with the puzzle. It's way too big for them. But we take one piece and we put it up on the china cabinet, and that's Lily's piece. And then we go about solving the problem. And by the way, puzzle. And by the way, if you need Lily's piece, you have to keep going back and checking, is that the piece I really need? But at the end, we have this entire puzzle done, except for this one piece that's missing. And then we call Lily in, and we give her that little piece of the puzzle. Now, this is a little 4-year-old. She climbs up on a chair, puts the puzzle piece in, wiggles around until it snaps in. And when it snaps in, Lily has solved the puzzle. She feels like she has done the entire 1,000-piece puzzle. We applaud her. She's great. If you can do that same thing with your audience, if you can, through techniques, learn how to take them up to a point to where it snaps, where it becomes a bit obvious, but they solve it themselves, it's more likely for them to remember it than you telling them every step. And if you want to really take a look at your presentation, look in the mirror. Your presentation is not your deck. Your presentation is you presenting. And this is where, if you have an opportunity to do a presentation and you're going to do it frequently, or you're going to do something more than once, I would encourage you to step forward and have one of your friends in the room, have a coworker, just pull out their iPhone and just record you giving the presentation. It is a heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching thing to do, to watch yourself present, but it is the iron sharpens iron thing. You will get better because of it. Record yourself, listen to yourself, look in the mirror. Do whatever it is you need to see yourself give that presentation, because you will hear yourself use words that are stutter words or whatever. You will see yourself do hand gestures and stuff that look awkward. You will learn to be better at giving presentations. Watch yourself, film yourself, and critique yourself. Avoid having barriers between you and your audience. If you look at a TED stage, the reason there's no podium, it's just a round circle, is because you're just out there. Audiences feel better when there's nothing between you and them, so do not stand behind a podium. Even if they give you a podium with a mic on it, and that's what you're supposed to use, stand off to the side of the podium, bend the mic over, and talk from there. Do everything you can not to have a barrier. If you happen to say you're doing a demonstration and you have a laptop in front of you and you need to be working on the laptop, if you can, see if you can take the podium and turn it to the side, so at least you can look over your shoulder and there's no barrier between you and the audience. So having no barriers actually helps out. It makes you a little more approachable. Inside rooms, likewise, just trying to get anything between you and your audience. Body language is a topic that we can spend hours on, and instead I've just put in this deck, this guy named Mark Bowden. He does a TED Talk that's particularly interesting on the importance of being inauthentic, and then so he talks about body language. Look at any of his stuff. It's all good stuff. Helps you with body language piece. Arrive early. Set up and then work the room. What I mean by that is don't wait till the last minute to come into the room and plug in and be trying to set up everything while people are in the room. If you can get in the room, and I know you can't always do that, but set up as much as you can ahead of time so that when you're in the room and you're setting up, you're done, then you can turn around and talk to people in the room. I've even, in cases where I've been last to get into the room, or it's the last minute you get in the room, while you're plugging up, Look over your shoulder, talk to people in the front row or whatever, say, oh, so tell me a little bit about what you do. What is it you do every day? What do you have the pleasure of doing? Why did you come to this meeting? Work the room and be approachable. Automatically start building connections early. And so that way your conversation that you're about to have with them in the presentation is going to be more unique. Know your tech and test your tech and be willing to scrap your tech. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people struggle through a demo, something breaks, and then they spend valuable time trying to fix it. Be ready just to scrap it because you need to come in with a plan B. If something doesn't work, what happens? If there's no visuals, what happens? If the audio doesn't work, what happens? What am I going to do? Have a clicker and a clock. I've got a little phone here with a timer on it helping me know that I've got 3.5 minutes left. Have a clock. Be ready and willing to stand by your time. One message a slide, working memory, size, contrast, visuals, and the fact that it's personal. My final challenge or warning to you is if you or your audience, either one of you, are not enjoying your presentations, you need to either improve or you need to find someone else to do them for you. Don't insist on getting in front, because I'll tell you why. If you get up in front and you do a poor IBM presentation, that's going to reflect badly to the client. The next time someone comes in and says, I'd like to come in and do a presentation, they're going to immediately think it's going to be one of those presentations, and you've done more disservice than you have service. So improve. It's up to you to get better, okay? You own this. Like I said in my last session, it's just about what you desire, what cost are you going to take, and what effort are you going to make. And if you're willing to take the effort, I'm willing to help you. So I'm here to help you. If you need help, if you need assistance, if you need coaching, if you want to videotape yourself giving a presentation and then put that video in box and then send me a link to it and say, Louis, can you critique me? I would be thrilled to do something like that, okay? It would be my pleasure to do that. I welcome you to look at the CML Ambassador Program sessions that are coming up next week on Monday. A good friend of mine and a coworker, Jeremy Waite, is doing these. These are also on the same topics of mind and heart kind of presentations and how do you speak to executives. How to encourage you to either look at those live or look at the recordings of those. And again, here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out and grab me.